Hey guys, I hope you had a fantastic week. In our last video, we introduced our first Gym Leader's ace Pokemon, Piblozix, but we need some more Ghost-type Pokemon to flesh out their team. So we're going to introduce that, and our Pikachu clone for the Wentano region, so hang around for that after our next Ghost Pokemon. One more note before we get into all of this, I do want feedback on these designs. Please feel free to comment and let me know what you do and don't like about them. Anyways, for our Ghost-type Pokemon, I wanted to create Wentano's first regional variant. I love Ghost-type Pokemon. It's probably one of my favorite types, and one of my favorite of the Ghost types is Mismagius, or Mismagius, or however you want to say it. It's a really simple design, but for whatever reason, it really resonated with an 11-year-old me, and has remained one of my favorites ever since. Coincidentally, I was trying to brainstorm what other Ghost-type Pokemon we could find in the middle of the desert on our way to our Gym Leader's city. I decided that it made sense to create a Dust Devil Pokemon, and I thought of the perfect way to adapt Misdreavus into a regional variant Dust Devil Pokemon. It's always interesting trying to conceptualize regional form Pokemon in a sense that these Pokemon need to be the same but different. Like, they need to have enough of the same features to still be the same Pokemon, but also enough differences to make them unique. Also, you have to be sure not to create something that would be too convergent instead, which seemed to more closely align with the body plan, but have drastically different typings and origins. The way I think about this is, regional variants have 95% of the same body parts, but those body parts look different. Convergent evolutions, however, have different body parts, but they look the same or have the same silhouette or body plan as the original Pokemon. I think that Alolan Exeggutor is a great example of this, where it's essentially the same Pokemon with one major difference in its giant neck, where if you look at Toedscruel, it has the same silhouette, but those tentacles that would be for Tentacruel, in this case, are more like fungusy tendrils, and they look very similar. For my regional Misdreavus, there are really two areas that need attention: what to do with its hair and what to do with its clothes, which are its body, but they look like clothes. Anyways, let's start with those. In order to get a feel for where this Pokemon's coming from, I decided to take inspiration from the historic pilgrims or pioneers of this region of America. In designing this Pokemon, I wanted to take things back to the many settlers who crossed through the American deserts and would eventually settle them. The kind of clothing these people wore would be what you're familiar with if you've ever watched a Western movie. That's why Wentanoan Misdreavus has a body that resembles the kind of dresses that were worn across the deserts at that time. Its necklace now replaced by a simple locket, as many who made such harsh journeys often only held onto a single piece of jewelry and sold everything else to afford the trip. I thought long and hard about the best way to tie this Pokemon into being a Dust Devil, especially in the vision that I had for its evolution, but I eventually settled on turning its hair into a broom of sorts. It maybe wouldn't have started out this way, but as this Pokemon was brought into the harsh deserts of Wentano long ago, those who brought it began to abuse it. Its long ponytail would be perfect for sweeping out the dust and dirt that would creep into settlers' wagons and homes. To this day, Wentanoan Misdreavus can be found sweeping the empty halls of ghost towns and places long forgotten. Meet Wentanoan Misdreavus, the dusting Pokemon. In days of old, these ghostly companions traveled with the people of Wentano, helping to keep their wagons and homes spotless. While their role may have been more of servitude in the past, they have kept this habit alive in modern Wentano, and you can still find them cleaning up abandoned buildings at night, and in the middle of the desert. So I've made it pretty clear where I want this evolution to end up thematically, but I also want to be clear that this is not going to be a regional variant of Mismagius. I thought about going that route, but my final vision and design felt like they were too far away from the original to be counted as a regional variant. Instead, this is a whole new evolution, just like Clodsire or Berserker. Misdreavus was mistreated for a long time before it was filled with enough spite to evolve. Its once beautiful hair was now covered in dust, and it began to resent and hate those that had mistreated it. It wanted to ruin their days, their homes, and their lives as it became so vindictive. This strong emotion led the first Wentanoan Misdreavus to evolve. It began to spin its dress and arms at high speeds, pulling all of the dust and grime out of its hair as well as the surrounding areas. A small tornado of dust and mess began to spin beneath its flowing cloak, and it could now literally take a storm through your living room if it wanted to. In modern times, these Pokemon are often found flying around at high speeds around the deserts of Wentano day and night. It's often been said that you should be kind to a Wentanoan Misdreavus, as when it evolves, it will seek you out and ruin your home if you weren't. Its dress has 2 layers now, with the upper layer having 2 arms made of the same cloth as the dress. The lower part of its dress never stops spinning, so that it can maintain the small whirlwind beneath it at all times, though it will slow down when it isn't trying to cause these large messes. The upper part of the dress can spin as well, but this is reserved for when this Pokemon really wants to whip up a storm, allowing it to move faster and spread its dust further than ever before. You'll also notice that this Pokemon has what resembles a cowboy hat on. Misdreavus has a witch's hat, and I wanted my Misdreavus evolution to have a hat as well. It's not just an area-appropriate attire, though. This cowboy hat is meant to invoke the idea that in this Pokemon's own eyes, it is the sheriff of the desert. It's the law. It's taking matters into its own clothy hands and enacting justice on those who mistreat Pokemon. This idea and attitude extend beyond just itself as well. Should this Pokemon witness you mistreating a Pokemon, expect a face full or a house full of dirt and dust to be hurled your way. When compared to Misdreavus, you'll see that this Pokemon's body is much shorter, and that much of its height actually comes from the swirling dust devil beneath it. Also, in case it isn't clear by now, a dust devil is just a small whirlwind. They're very common in the region that Wentano is based off of, though they aren't known for doing serious damage. Instead, they're often small and only visible when they pick up dust, dirt, and garbage. They often dispel it quite quickly, though, and you can most definitely find examples up to half a mile wide that have done some damage, but nothing too serious. Meet Misdreavus, the Dust Devil Pokemon. Unlike its clean freak ancestor Misdreavus, Misdreavus is all about chaos. It spins the lower part of its body to create fierce dust devils, sending dirt and debris flying into every crevice. If you manage to annoy one, expect a whirlwind of sand in your home soon after. They consider themselves the sheriffs of Wentano's desert and will readily take justice into their own hands. Now let's get talking about Pikaclones. I think that for the most part, these Pokemon are either loved or hated, and there aren't many in the middle. To me, the problem with these kinds of Pokemon is that after Plusle and Minun, they don't feel particularly inspiring. I do love Pachirisu, but in context, he just looks like a Pikachu squirrel. That was probably the point, but at the same time, we already had 5 Pikachus. Even Emolga, who I like as a standalone design, and it does a lot more by adding a new typing, when grouped with the rest of the Pikaclones, feels disappointing and empty. That's why my personal favorite Pikaclone is actually Togedemaru. It feels like it went off script the most when compared to the rest of the bunch. For our Pikaclone, I wanted to find creative ways that we could still make a small electric mammal, but maybe push the design and concept a little bit further than other Pokemon might have. I chose a mole, which, just like a hedgehog, is not a rodent, because I felt like if any one small mammal should have an electricity-based abilities, it would be a mole. Why, you might ask? Because many moles are either blind or nearly blind and instead rely on their incredible senses to navigate in the dark and find food. Especially the star-nosed mole, which, let's be honest, kind of already looks like a Pokemon. So we have a nearly blind, electrically able star-nosed mole who uses its nose to sense the electricity in the world around it. Think about it like the special sensory organs that sharks have around their nose, which allow them to feel the electricity running through the bodies of organisms around them. This, combined with their incredible sense of smell, makes them fearsome hunters. I want this Pokemon to have similar abilities, though, just to be absolutely clear, we are not making a Pikachu land shark. It would be cool, but it would be too much off of what I want to do with this mole. Anyways, there really isn't too much more to this design for now. Something I'm constantly trying to remind myself when making these basic level Pokemon is that they're supposed to be somewhat simple. They very rarely have extreme features or abilities, and those are left for their evolutions. I had to keep reminding myself that this Pokemon is just an electric star-nosed mole, and that's enough for these kinds of Pokemon. Meet Molectric, the electric mole Pokemon. Molectric are nearly blind, but don't require eyesight as they spend much of their time digging burrows underground. Instead, they rely on a highly specialized organ on their nose to feel the electric currents flowing around the organisms and earth around them. This special nose makes them excellent at finding small bugs to eat, even in pitch-dark caves and tunnels. If you see a Molectric, understand that they are incredibly shy and don't currently view your actions as threatening, but that can change in a heartbeat. So, how do we evolve Molectric into something that fully realizes his concepts and ideas? Well, first and foremost, I think there needs to be a real emphasis on cuteness. It may sound silly, but if you look at Dugtrio and Excadrill, they aren't particularly cute. They're silly and cool, which is entirely acceptable for Pokemon. But what I mean to point out is that there's a niche for our Pokemon to fill here. Being a mole Pokemon, its vibe and demeanor need to be separate out there from the other mole Pokemon that already exist. There are a couple ways we can go about doing this, but pose is really important here. This Pokemon does have large claws and the ability to electrocute its foes. Those aren't really the things we want to focus on when we're going for cute. Instead, I decided to plop him down on his bum, which I don't know if you say bum or not, you can call it whatever you want, his booty, and have him sitting down as if he was looking up at you. I decided to accentuate that this is a furry Pokemon and created what I call fuzzy zones on the back of the neck, the head, the belly, the tail. One detail that I really like is that the fluffy bunch of fur at the base of the tail, combined with the typical lightning bolt shape, gives this Pokemon a little thundercloud on its rear. The other focal point this Pokemon has is its nose. Now that its sensory abilities will need to be elevated even further, its nose needs to be indicative of that. It now resembles a burst of electricity with 12 individual points that can be used to collect information for this Pokemon. It gains an additional ability, though, as it learns to better use its electricity. By sending out pulses of electricity in all directions, it can sense how that electricity behaves and even returns back to it. This Pokemon may be entirely blind, but now it has what I like to call electrolocation. Basically, it's able to completely sense the world around it through the electricity that flows naturally through all things, as well as the electricity that it releases itself. Meet Volburo, the electrolocation Pokemon. Volburo have gone completely blind, but often have a much better picture of the world around them when compared to other Pokemon. This is because of their incredible ability to sense electricity running through the nerves of organisms around them. You may think that this would make the Pokemon vulnerable to attacks from the air or at long distance, but Volburo can release pulses of electricity that it uses to detect foes or prey from significant lengths. There you have it, another ghost type, and the Wentanoan Pikaclone. I've been planning both of these for a minute, but they just happen to line up in the same video. We may or may not get another ground type, I'm not quite sure yet, but either way, I'm super excited about both of these designs. I love Misdreavus, and I'm excited to have given it some love. I'm also pumped about a Pikaclone that to me feels like it's really its own Pokemon, not just an attempt to cash in on other popular Pokemon. Just a heads up, the video that's going to come after this one isn't going to contain any new Pokemon, though it will have some hints about new Pokemon. We'll get to that. Essentially, this next video is going to be where we start spilling out the story of Wentano. I don't know how this video is going to perform. I don't know if I've really seen anything like this that wasn't actually a gameplay walkthrough, and we don't have a game to accompany this, so it's kind of all up in the air. If that interests you, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. If you want to be along for the ride, I'd love to have you. For now, thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, subscribe or do whatever you're comfortable with. I hope you'll go out and make something incredible that you can share with the world too. Thanks.